What would drive a man to burn every dollar he ever earned? Not hide it, not spend it, but watch it turn to ashes. This is not a metaphor. This is the story of Alan Kessler, a respected private banker who once managed over $80 million in assets, and who, one night, drenched his fortune in gasoline and lit a match. The reason? It wasn't madness. It was something darker, something meticulously planned. In this psychological descent into financial self-destruction, we uncover the truth behind one of the most bizarre economic suicides ever witnessed. He always arrived before sunrise. Alan Kessler's office at Blackwood and Harlan Private Banking, nestled atop a steel and glass tower in downtown Chicago, overlooked a skyline shaped by power and greed. On the 49th floor, everything was clean, symmetrical, and suffocatingly expensive. Glass walls, mahogany desks, Persian rugs hand-woven by blind artisans in Turkey. The scent of aged leather and espresso lingered like a badge of victory. This was no place for mistakes, or humanity. Alan didn't make mistakes. He was a man of exact numbers and exact intentions, whose mere presence caused junior analysts to silence their breathing. At 43, he was a legend in tailored Navy suits. His name appeared on Forbes' top, advisors under 45, and his clientele list read like an Oscar after-party guest list: film stars, tech giants, heirs of oil dynasties. Yet no one really knew him. No one had been inside his penthouse. No one knew where he went on weekends. Rumors floated like the scent of his cologne. He lived in a silent monastery in Oregon. He never ate cooked food. He paid cash for everything, even his Porsche. But the truth was far simpler. Alan Kessler was a man haunted not by a tragic past, but by a need so primal it consumed everything: control. He was born in the middle of a snowstorm in Big Timber, Montana, to a father who spoke to cows more often than people, and a mother who worked the night shift at a frozen pea factory. They lived in a trailer too small for dreams. Yet Alan dreamed. By 12, he was reading financial statements he pulled from library dumpsters. By 16, he was trading penny stocks under a fake name. At 21, he was expelled from college for hacking the university's investment fund and turning a $40,000 profit. He didn't see it as theft. He saw it as optimization. That same year, he moved to Chicago with 2 suits and a laptop. Within 5 years, he was managing $30 million in private capital. Within 10, he had created the Kessler method, a ruthless, data-driven strategy that could forecast a client's financial collapse months before it happened. His insights were surgical, unfeeling, unmatched. And yet, in the early hours before the market opened, Alan would sit alone in that high-rise office, staring out into the fog, clutching a single Polaroid photo of a farm, a red barn, a woman holding a baby. No one at the firm ever saw the photo. No one knew it existed. It was the only thing on his otherwise empty desk. Alan never married, never vacationed, never trusted anyone. His life was a series of calculated risks and secured returns, until one day he received a letter. Not an email. A letter. Handwritten. On textured ivory paper. No return address. Inside was a single sentence: "You lied about the fund." That's all it said. Alan froze. He had received threats before. Angry clients, jealous rivals. But this was different. This was specific, targeted, and it was true. He had lied. Once. The Kessler Global Commodities Fund was a ghost, a fabrication he created for a single high-net-worth client from Dubai who insisted on investing in rare earth metals. Alan never bought the assets. He rerouted the capital. A short-term maneuver, he told himself. He would make it whole. He always did. But something about the letter unsettled him. It wasn't the threat. It was the timing. No one was supposed. To know. Not yet. That night, for the first time in 15 years, Alan didn't go home. He stayed in the office, watching the shadows crawl across the floor as the city fell asleep. His reflection in the glass window no longer looked invincible. It looked tired, vulnerable. The next morning, he requested a full liquidation of all personal offshore holdings. Then he ordered a private delivery of industrial gasoline. The client's name was Khaled Al-Rami, a Qatari magnate with stakes in shipping, energy, and telecommunications across the Gulf. He was known for two things: his extravagant tastes and his complete distrust in banks, which made it all the more surprising when he chose Alan. They met at a financial summit in Geneva, where Alan had delivered a keynote on currency flow manipulation in post-oil economies. Al-Rami didn't applaud. He waited until Alan stepped off stage, then walked straight toward him and said, "I need someone who doesn't believe in honesty. Just results." Alan smiled. "Then you found the right banker." That was 3 years before the letter arrived. Al-Rami wanted to invest $17 million into a custom fund, designed solely to acquire and hold strategic reserves of cobalt, lithium, and cerium oxide, rare earth metals essential to the future of battery technology. He demanded absolute secrecy and quarterly updates via encrypted courier. There was one problem. The metals were already cornered by Chinese monopolies, and entry required bribes Alan wasn't willing to pay. Not because of ethics, but because it introduced chaos, unpredictable agents, greed, corruption. Alan didn't gamble, so he created a shell fund. On paper, Kessler Global Commodities Fund existed. Registered in Liechtenstein, complete with forged purchase orders, digital vault statements, and a dedicated analyst team, none of whom existed. He diverted the $17 million into a currency arbitrage cycle that netted him nearly 11% annually. He would make Al-Rami whole in 3 years. Until the letter came. Until someone found out. The moment he read it, something shifted inside Alan. Not panic, not guilt, but irritation. The illusion had cracked prematurely. His plan wasn't ready. He didn't control the ending. That was intolerable. Within days, Alan began transferring all his assets, legal and hidden, into cash. No digital trails, no brokerage records. He flew to Zurich under a false name and personally withdrew over $2.5 million from 5 different safety deposit boxes. In Miami, he closed out a silent stake in a beachfront resort. In the Cayman Islands, he met with a silent partner who owed him favor and walked away with $4 million in bearer bonds. By month's end, he had over $28 million in untraceable currency. But it wasn't enough. Alan knew that exposure would come, not from financial audits, but from people, assistants, secretaries, drivers. So he began erasing his life. He severed ties with clients, sent polite resignations to private clubs, and shut down his social profiles. He even stopped taking vitamins, something he had religiously done for 2 decades. At night, he sat alone in his penthouse, surrounded by briefcases of cash and surveillance equipment. He didn't sleep. He watched, monitored, waited. Then came the second letter. No envelope this time. Just a folded note taped to his apartment door. "You stole from someone who doesn't forgive." That night, Alan ordered his assistant to cancel all meetings for the next 6 weeks. He told her he was going on silent retreat. She didn't question it. No one ever questioned Alan Kessler. He hired a private logistics firm to move 27 heavy crates, officially labeled as antique art, to a cabin property in Utah he had purchased years earlier through a trust. Remote, cold, hidden in the Wasatch Mountains. No neighbors for miles. No cell service. Just pine trees, silence, and isolation. The crates contained only 2 things: money and gasoline. Tightly packed bundles of $100 bills. Silver suitcases with bearer bonds. Stacks of euros, francs, and gold-backed notes. Alongside them, sealed metal drums of high-grade industrial fuel. It wasn't a panic buy, it was architectural. Alan wasn't preparing to disappear, he was preparing to perform. He spent the next few weeks alone, mapping the cabin's interior, stripping it of furniture, and converting one room into a chamber lined with heat-proof ceramic tiles. In the center, a steel fire pit. Around it, shelves, custom-built to hold bundles of cash. When a local grocer asked why he was buying so many fire extinguishers and lighters, Alan simply said, "I like to be prepared." But no one was prepared for what was coming. The cabin was more fortress than refuge. Perched along a frozen ridge of the Wasatch Range, it had been built decades ago by a survivalist millionaire who believed society would collapse in 2007. Alan found the property fascinating, not for its aesthetics, but its symbolism. Isolation, preparedness, the illusion of control amid chaos. He arrived in the dead of night, the cabin illuminated only by moonlight and the dull blue gleam of security cameras. The air was thin, dry, and cruelly silent. Snow had begun to accumulate in patches, softening the edges of the pine-strewn landscape. But inside the cabin, everything was harsh and intentional. The crates were already waiting. Alan wore gloves, not to hide fingerprints, but to maintain detachment. One by one, he opened the wooden boxes, revealing bricks of cash so tightly wrapped. They looked more like industrial supplies than currency. Beside them, the silver drums of gasoline glinted like promises. It took him 2 days to unload everything, organizing the cash by currency, country, and denomination. The room he chose was formerly a wine cellar, sunk into the earth, naturally insulated and acoustically dead. He replaced the racks with steel shelving, bolted them to the concrete walls. At the center of the room he placed a reinforced steel basin, custom-welded and shipped under the guise of an art installation base. Above it, he installed a single hanging bulb, its yellow glow flickering like a dying star. Then he began construction of what he privately called the altar. It was not a shrine of faith, but of finality. Alan arranged the bills in tight rows along the shelves, perfectly spaced. He laid out stacks of euros beside stacks of rupees, yuan beside francs, pesos beside pounds. The room looked like a museum of economic history. Except everything was real, tangible, flammable. Each day he refined the layout, adjusted the height of the fire basin, tested airflow using incense smoke, calculated burn rates. He took notes like a scientist studying combustion. No detail was spared. The humidity was regulated to ensure dry ignition. The shelves were coated in flame-retardant paint to prolong the visuals. Cameras were positioned to capture every angle. This was not an act of destruction. It was a demonstration. At night, Alan sat in the main cabin, writing in a black leather-bound notebook. The pages were filled with confessions, not just financial, but personal. Betrayals he had committed, clients he had manipulated, a woman he had loved and abandoned in Munich. Every page ended with a single phrase: "There is no redemption in wealth." He stopped shaving, stopped eating solid food. His face hollowed, but his eyes became clearer, sharper, as if the fog that had clouded his soul for years was finally lifting. One morning, just after 4 a.m., he stood in the middle of the vault, dressed in a black turtleneck and slacks. He tested the ignition system: 2 matches, 2 backup lighters, and a hand-wrapped torch soaked in kerosene. He looked around the room, then up at the camera. He pressed record. The monologue that followed would never be broadcast, never submitted as evidence, never viewed by authorities. It was copied onto a USB drive and sealed in a fireproof box. But what he said became legend, retold in whispers across financial circles. It began like this: "I once thought money could protect me, that if I amassed enough, I'd become untouchable. But wealth is not a shield. It's a chain, a language of lies. It speaks for us, shapes us, replaces us. You don't own your fortune. It owns you. He spoke for exactly 9 minutes. No rage, no panic, just clarity. Then he knelt, struck a match, and held it in front of him. The flame danced, he paused, and in that moment, surrounded by $28 million in combustible memories, Alan Kessler smiled for the first time in years. The wind was dead that night. Not a single gust stirred the trees outside the cabin. The moon hung low, a silver coin drifting through black velvet. Inside, the air was dense with gasoline vapor, a scent that clung to the walls, to Alan's clothes, to time itself. It was the scent of finality. At exactly 11:47 p.m., he lit the torch. It flared to life with a soft roar, illuminating his face in hellish orange. Shadows danced behind him, distorted silhouettes of the man he once was. He stood still, listening to the crackle of the flame, the only sound in a world that had gone silent. Then, without ceremony, he touched the fire to the nearest stack of currency. It ignited instantly. The flame climbed with greed, devouring hundreds in seconds, then thousands. The shelves began to shimmer with heat, and the air pulsed with the low roar of combustion. Alan stepped back, eyes fixed on the growing inferno. His breathing remained steady. There was no fear, only awe. The fire moved like a living thing. First the dollars, then the euros, then the bonds. Each burst sent new waves of heat through the chamber. Plastics curled, metals screamed. Ash rose in thick spirals, carried upward into a custom ventilation shaft he had designed to funnel smoke through the mountain's natural chimneys. Alan stood barefoot, the soles of his feet on cold concrete, as his life turned to flame. He didn't speak. Not now. His words had already been given to the camera. This moment was for silence, for watching, for witnessing the truth that no one else would ever see, that money, worshipped, chased, hoarded, and feared, was still, at its core, just paper. Outside, the snow began to fall, slowly, gently, as if nature was trying to cover what it didn't understand. Inside, the vault glowed like a furnace, its walls pulsating with light. Heat curled Alan's hair and soaked his clothes in sweat. But he never moved. For hours, he watched it burn. By morning, there was nothing left but ash. Gray, fine, and eerily uniform. The shelves were blackened, the steel basin warped, but everything else, gone. Even the cameras had melted into the walls. Except for one. A final lens, encased in heat-resistant ceramic, had captured everything. Alan retrieved the drive, sealed it in a waterproof pouch, and placed it inside the fireproof box. Then, from a secret compartment in the wall, he removed a letter. It was addressed in blue ink. To Eliza, for when the time is right. Alan left the cabin at dawn, walking down the ridge with only a backpack and a cane. No one saw him leave. No one heard from him again. The authorities wouldn't find the site for months. When they did, they assumed arson, a robbery, a breakdown. But there were no fingerprints, no security system logs, no signs of struggle. Just a room that had once contained millions and now held only silence until they found the box. Inside it, along with the video and the letter, was a single photograph. A red barn, a woman holding a baby, and a younger Alan, smiling in a way he never did in adulthood. On the back, in the same blue ink, some things are worth remembering. Others must be burned. Thank you so much for staying with us until now. You are one of the few people who made it this far in the story, and that shows just how much tales like this still hold power over us. But believe me, the best is yet to come. The investigators arrived with snow still on their boots. It had taken nearly 5 months for anyone to report Alan Kessler missing. His absence didn't raise alarms immediately. He had no family, no employer, no debt. His estate was silent, his businesses liquidated. Only one assistant, a woman named Dana, quietly informed the firm that she hadn't heard from him in weeks. She wasn't concerned, she said, just curious. The authorities didn't find much. The cabin was cold, still, and eerily preserved. The fire had consumed everything in the vault, but the structure was intact. No sign of forced entry. No sign of struggle. Just a burnt room and a sealed fireproof box sitting in a concealed compartment behind the wall. The contents of the box would haunt them. The USB drive, when decrypted, revealed the monologue. Alan's voice was calm, controlled, eerily lucid. No signs of delusion or mental instability. In fact, it was the clarity that disturbed them most. His words weren't those of a man giving up. They were of a man who believed he had finally won. Then came the letter. It was addressed to Eliza Granger, a name that didn't appear in any of his business records or social circles. After weeks of digging, they found her living under a new identity in Colorado, running a bookstore under the name E.G. Weston. She refused to speak on camera, but privately she confirmed that she had known Alan deeply, decades ago, before the money, before the city. They had met in college, fallen in love, planned to run a small farm together, away from the noise. But Alan's ambition had poisoned everything. He left her with nothing but a child and a promise that he would make things right someday. She never saw him again. In the letter, Alan admitted everything: the fake fund, the clients, the secrets. But more than that, he revealed the truth behind the fire. It wasn't about guilt. It wasn't even about redemption. It was about erasure. He wrote, "The world only sees what we leave behind. Money becomes memory. I wanted to leave nothing they could use. Not as proof, not as leverage, not as legacy. If wealth is power, then burning it is the only form of rebellion left." He sent her the deed to the land, the cabin, the mountain. He asked her not for forgiveness, but for silence. Eliza never cashed the deed. She donated the land to a conservation trust and never returned to the property. To this day, hikers sometimes stumble upon the remnants of the cabin. Most don't understand what they're seeing. But some do. Whispers of Alan's story spread through online forums, financial circles, underground podcasts. Some believe he faked his death and started over in South America. Others think it was a message to someone far more powerful than the public ever knew. A few believe he truly died in that cabin, body reduced to ash like the money. But the truth? Alan Kessler was never after wealth. He was after control. And in the end, his greatest act of power was choosing to walk away from everything, without leaving anyone else the ability to follow. Alan's story isn't about insanity. It's about clarity, about the quiet horror of realizing that even when you have everything, it still owns you. What would it take for you to burn your fortune? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story haunted you even a little, subscribe for more. The next episode reveals how a lottery winner lost his entire fortune not once, but twice, and the final time. It wasn't an accident.